IELTS Listening, version 51400. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Part 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a man who wants information about bicycling holidays and a travel agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. Thank you for calling Getaway Tours. I'm Sandra. How can I help you today?
Hi, Sandra. I've got a lot of questions, but can you first tell me your office hours?
Sure. We're open from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Thanks, Sandra. I saw your article in my favorite magazine last month, and I'd like more information about the different tours.
We have gotten a lot of calls about that article.
I'm not surprised. Is it true that if I book a tour, the prices start at only $1,100 per person?
Yes, that's a special offer for this month. Normally, they're from $1,400 going up to $2,000. And it includes accommodation and meals. This offer is for any of our 36 different bicycling tours.
Well, I am definitely interested in the bicycling tours, but I thought there were only 30. Are all of them for a week?
Most of them. If bicycling is not your thing, we also have walking tours to choose from.
That's a lot of options.
Are you aware that our trips all begin on Tuesday?
That's great. It would give me Monday to pack. How do you suggest I choose from so many options?
Yes, it is tough to make a choice.
I would love to hear about your most popular tours.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
I'll start with the bicycling tours, since you said that was your main interest.
My wife and I are not in great shape for a hard ride. Do you have rides that are at the beginner level?
Sure. There's our Florida trip. That's 14 nights. But I'd recommend our holiday on the east coast of the U.S. in an area known as the Autumn Route, which is just 6 nights. With short, leisurely routes on trails by the riverside and through the forest, you have plenty of time to explore the landscape during your holiday.
Wow! Seeing the changing colors of the leaves would be amazing.
Yes, that's right. You also have the option to stop at some outstanding homes and to see their gardens. Whichever cycling holiday you choose, you usually spend 2 nights at each hotel and always have plenty of time to explore, rest, and sightsee as you wish.
Could you tell me about one of your moderate rides? You never know. Maybe my wife and I will get into enough shape to be able to do one.
Well, let me see. Oh, this trip is actually 10 nights long. It travels through parts of Southern California. The ride begins on a mountain trail and finally brings you down to the coastal roads.
Oh, yes, I see that here on your website. Oh, that looks amazing. I like that we would have the opportunity to try some of the local cuisine.
Yes, the cuisine in this area makes lavish use of colorful local produce. And then, the great weather of this region is a great feature by itself.
Do we stay in hotels on this trip?
You stay in hotels most of the way until the end, when you stay on a farm overlooking the sea. That's always really popular.
Wow, both trips sound fabulous. How far in advance do I have to make reservations?
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear the assistant principal of a primary school talking to a group of parents who have offered to help with sports activities. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good evening, parents, and thank you for offering your help. I'm here to talk about the sports programs that the children are taking part in this term. Although we do sport during class time, children often have extra activities before or after school or at weekends, and that's when we need you. First up, we're looking for parents who would like to become team coaches or managers. We had some excellent people last year, but some of those parents now have other commitments. It's the Year 4 netball team, the Year 5 and 6 rugby teams, and the Year 3 hockey team that need new people. Now, coaching. I know some parents might not be completely familiar with, say, rugby or netball rules, but don't let that put you off. Obviously, knowledge of the game helps, but if you're keen, there are some coaching courses you can take before the training sessions for players begin, and these also get held throughout the whole season. What's really required is the right attitude. Are you the kind of person that can motivate kids and make the game seem exciting? All the rugby training and matches are organised by North Shore Rugby Club. If you do volunteer to become a rugby coach, you'll need to go along to an important day that's coming up. That's on Saturday the 23rd. It takes place on the rugby grounds, and it's when all the kids put their names down for a team, and the organisers are on hand to give parents a bit more information. Matches are on Saturday morning and training sessions on a Wednesday after school. Moving on to netball. Matches and uniforms. Matches are on Monday at 4 p.m. and take place at the North Harbour Netball Grounds. And for uniforms, we've just ordered a new set from the sports store in town, and parents must hire one from the school secretary for $15, which gets refunded at the end of the season.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, You have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, some of you are kindly helping with the cross-country running event. Children in years 3 to 6 will be running from school, at the bottom of your map there. The route isn't marked on your map, I'm afraid, but I'm going to point out some different places that need parent supervision. The drink station is one. If you're handing out water, head to the north car park, and the station will be set up on the other side of the road from it, right by the flag post. 2 or 3 parents will be needed to help out at the major crossing point, just to make sure everybody's going the right way. So, on the map, there's that little footpath going up past the school, then it splits into 3 directions. The crossing point is at the end of the left-hand path, heading west, just before you cross Summer Street. Now, we'll need a couple of parents at the halfway point to send the children in the right direction. So there are 4 buildings on the far left-hand side. Their halfway point is just to the right of these buildings. Just cheer the kids on. And if anyone has given up running, that's fine. OK, the teacher at our first aid post might need help sticking plasters on. The quickest way to get to first aid is to head up the footpath next to school, and when you get to the second turning on the right, head down there, and it's sort of opposite the satellite dish. What else? The rest area is for children needing a break, and that's the place nearest the south car park, near the road. And if any parent here is handy with a video camera, we'd really appreciate some help with filming the event. This means heading up the footpath by the school, then keep going up, with the flag post on your left and the satellite dish on your right. And the filming spot is just there in front of the trees. Well, I think that covers everything, but if you have any questions, please...
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2.
Part 3. You will hear 2 architecture students, called Luke and Millie, discussing their assignment about the use of plastic as a building material. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Millie.
Hi, Luke. So, we're here to talk over our first assignment on alternative building materials.
Yeah, I think it will be really interesting to learn more about how plastic has been used.
I found lots of information from the 1960s.
So, did you find out why the idea of plastic buildings wasn't popular with the public at that time?
It wasn't the material's environmental credentials. The concept of plastic houses was just too futuristic.
So you mean it was their appearance?
No. People liked their modern design, but the idea of that sort of building as a home just didn't appeal.
Right. I did some research on the kind of problems engineers had with the old plastics in the 1960s and 1970s.
What did you learn?
Well, firstly, because plastic doesn't weigh very much, the buildings weren't very good in windy weather. They managed to fix that by amending the shape of the buildings, but the real disadvantage was that when the plastic was exposed to the light, it developed fine cracks, and when rain got into these cracks, the plastic would deform and lose its strength.
Right.
I wonder where we can find some more information about the situation nowadays.
Maybe we could ask one of the PhD students.
I expect they'll be too busy.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we could always use the internet.
Maybe we should research more academic sources like the journals we have in the library.
Okay. That way we can reference everything properly at the end of the assignment. Have you read Peterson's article about plastic houses?
Yeah, it was really good.
But it didn't have enough illustrations of the houses. That was a shame. They'd have been useful for us as examples in our presentation. I liked the way it was organised, though. That was really clear.
Yeah, and it wasn't too technical, but you did need to know a bit about plastic houses before you read it to get the most out of it.
That's true.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
OK. Well, shall we start comparing our findings then?
Sure, I'll make some notes.
Well, the earliest one I read about was a plastic house called the House of the Future that was built in 1957, though no one actually lived in it. It was on show at a theme park in America for 10 years. After that, they demolished it, but they had a hard time. It was really built to last. They couldn't break the plastic up.
Was that the one that had an ultrasonic dishwashing machine?
Yes, that would still be pretty revolutionary today.
Did you read about the Wonder House? It was designed in 1964 by an industrial designer called Alfred Noyes.
Oh, the one with the roof like a sort of tent or an umbrella?
That's right. The roof was made of fiberglass and it curved down to the ground at each corner, enclosing a big central space. Then the sides were filled with glass or plastic. It was a really innovative idea for the time, but Noyes only made a small model and the design wasn't implemented.
Pity.
What about those spaceship houses they built between 1968 and 1978? Like flying saucers. They built over 100 of them.
I don't know if I'd want to live in one. The living area was quite limited and they had really low ceilings. But they do look really futuristic, don't they?
With their white walls and circular shape, yes. But the plastic houses I like are the foam houses they built between 1979 and 1983. They've got really curvy shapes. They built them by spraying foam over a great big balloon.
They were partly built to show what computers could do in the home. Things like controlling heat and light and so on. Quite new ideas at the time. And they were very well insulated as well, so they saved energy. People were just beginning to get into that.
I read about a plastic exhibition hall that can all be packed away in a relatively small container. You just put it on a truck and take it to wherever you want it, then inflate it. You know, fill it up with air and there's room for hundreds of people. And when the exhibition or whatever's over, you just take it down again. And you can reuse it again and again.
And there's a house in New Zealand that's built from household and industrial waste, like plastic boxes. They say it's a much better construction material than bricks from the point of view of insulation.
Yes, they're using that idea to build houses in other parts of the world too. OK, well, it looks as if we've got plenty of stuff.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture about an early form of photography that developed in Britain and France called calotype photography. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Morning, everyone. Welcome back to this series of lectures on the development of photography. Last week, we looked at a type of photography called daguerreotype, the first commercially successful photographic process. Today, we're going to look at how this was gradually replaced by a technique called calotype. Daguerreotype was a major breakthrough, but there were problems with it. In particular, because the image was produced on a copper sheet, it was expensive to create each photograph. As a result, during the 1840s, a man named William Talbot began looking for an alternative approach. Talbot eventually became an influential figure, but he always said he was not a professional photographer. In fact, he trained as an artist. His greatest interest was painting, and he only became involved with photography as a secondary interest. Talbot spent many years trying to solve the problems associated with daguerreotype photography. He tried a number of different approaches, and it took some time to find a successful alternative. But in the end, what he did was, instead of producing each photograph on a sheet of copper, he produced them on paper, and at the time, this was a great advance. Talbot's technique, which he called calotype photography, had other advantages as well. Maybe the most important was that the pictures themselves weren't as sharp as the ones produced before. The sharpness had been a problem because it distorted everything. But this new calotype process produced images that were realistic compared to all earlier photographs. Calotype photography was invented in Britain, but it was also popular with French photographers. The 1850s were a time of rapid development in France, and photography was used to record these changes. One example of how important photography had become occurred in 1851, when the French government established a society to promote the interests of photographers, something that hadn't happened before. To begin with, there were 5 members, and maybe the most important was a man called Gustave Le Gray. Le Gray became increasingly fascinated by the calotype process. Most of all, he wanted to produce different types of image, so began a series of experiments to see how this might be done. His greatest success was when he designed the first camera that was able to create enlargements, an important step forward. Another of Legray's innovations was his work on the size of the equipment necessary to take photographs. Originally it was very heavy and difficult to move about, but Legray made it lighter and smaller. This meant he could take photographs outdoors more easily, rather than being limited to the studio, which had sometimes been the case until then. Legray produced numerous photographs during this period and was highly regarded among fellow photographers. But his work also became famous among the general public because he wrote a very popular series of books describing the calotype process and giving examples of his work. The simple fact was that people liked photography. They thought it was reliable, especially compared to drawing, where the human hand might alter or exaggerate things. This had various consequences, one of which was that photography was now often used to record the huge program of renovation work of historical buildings in France during the 1850s. The camera doesn't lie, so people said. As a result, the calotype process was admired not only by photographers, but increasingly by the government and by mainstream society. However, debate still remained about whether photography could truly be called an art form like sculpture or drawing. Certainly, although the public liked it, in the opinion of critics, photography could not be compared to other established forms of art. So, in summary, what can we say about calotype photography during this period? One thing to re-emphasise is that the 1850s were a period of great development in Britain and France. The culture in both countries admired all new technological advances, and photography represented these ideas because it was considered to be a science by most people. However, photographers didn't stop experimenting with new materials to improve the quality of their work. Most of all, they were searching for ways to make images more permanent because calotype photographs tended to fade over time. And in the end, they found that if the image was produced on glass, it lasted much longer. So calotype photography was slowly replaced by other techniques which had greater longevity.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.